that's okay. It's actually because most of us have never really learned how to take notes that help us remember. So with that, we hope today's presentation helps you out. I just want to make sure that everything is clear on my end. If you'd like to share where you're joining us from today, please feel free to do so in the chat section to my right, which would probably be your left, and we will interact that way. I can also share my email if you have any questions, and you want access to the presentation, you want additional support, you want to learn a little bit more about who we are here at Iris Reading, you can always send us an email. Mine is cynthia@irisreading.com, or you can check out our website, irisreading.com. Again, I can make this presentation available to you if you need it or if you'd like it. Again, just send me a quick email and I can get that to you. Now, we said today we are talking about note taking, so if you are struggling, not a problem at all. Isn't it funny how we are expected to take notes in school, but we don't actually learn how to take them so that we know or we can remember that information later on, right? We all just kind of take notes and hope for the best, just like memorizing too. We know we have to memorize things, but we don't always learn how to. And so that is where Iris Reading jumps in to fill in that gap, pretty big gap, because taking notes and memorizing are a really big part of learning. Want to quickly share our social media. So if you would like to check us out on Instagram, on Facebook, we are on TikTok as well. And you all are watching us today on YouTube. So support us by following, like to us by liking or following us. We would appreciate that. We are also a group where we talk about all things related to reading and learning. So if you'd like to join that, it is called Book Lovers Assemble. And that is once again a Facebook group, which is hosted by us here at Iris Reading. Now, we know that when we're looking to take notes, they are so that they can help us remember, right? That's the point of everything. But the problem is that we don't always know how to do that. And so a few things that we'll cover today, some different note-taking methods. We're going to find some different templates. Maybe the linear version of taking notes, it just doesn't work for you. And when we say linear version, we're talking about just writing in full sentences across the page. Most of us are probably used to doing that, but think about how you think. Do you think in full sentences always? Not exactly, right? So why take notes in full sentences if that's not necessarily mimicking how we think? Something to keep in mind, the read and recall exercise. So when you have to read and maybe annotate, what are some strategies we can use, especially when the material is like not our favorite flavor? And that happens, right? We'll talk about some digital tools as well as when to review our notes. It is not a matter of taking pretty notes. It is also a matter of strategizing as to the frequency in which we are going to review this information. So this is everything we are covering. Again, I want to quickly just toggle back and forth from our video, from my slides to the chat. I don't seem to see anyone dropping anything in there, so that is great. Let us continue. So we know, again, we're taking notes to help us remember, and when we think about remembering, we sometimes may think at the fact that the more you do something, the higher and the longer the chances of that staying in your memory, right? So repetition, we know the more you do it, it will last hopefully longer. The problem is that most people will only, how should I say this? We only tend to, it doesn't involve a lot of strategy, the types of repetition that we have been able to observe. So maybe reading the same sentence over and over, some people think in theory that is repetition, so it should stay in your memory for longer, but that's not always the case, right? It's mindless repetition, and there is actually a term for this called rote, R-O-T-E, which means that you're really not paying attention as you're repeating the information, and once you think the information is going to stay in your memory, it actually doesn't. So we don't want mindless repetition, we want strategic repetition so that it is successfully engraved in our memory. Now, when we're reading, we may have to take some notes, right? And you may be thinking, well, I'm not sure. Should I take notes at the end of reading? Should I take it near the middle when I'm reading? We have a 4-step process to better reading and learning here at Iris Reading, and it's very easy to remember because it's after our company name. So the I is for inspecting. We talk about inspecting anything and everything before you read it. And I do encourage you to check out our speed reading workshop. It is our #1. It is how Iris Reading came to be. We do 60 or 90-minute sessions with those, and we talk about not only how to read faster, but also how to comprehend faster. So if you are struggling again with your reading speed, which is not a problem, a lot of us have in the past. Me too, and I was reading way, way, way below average when I took my very first speed reading class. So it has helped me out over the years. I have doubled my speed, and it has really helped me, encouraged me even to go back to school. So I do encourage you, if you are maybe struggling, check out that speed reading workshop. We talk about inspecting and reading. So essentially we're saying check it out before you actually read it, which is a little different from what I remember when in school, specifically in elementary school. The teacher would say never, ever, ever read ahead. At least my teacher would. Never read ahead. Always read up until, but don't read ahead. That's not right. And I never really thought about why it wasn't right. I was just kind of programmed to not do that. And so there's a lot of consequences with not knowing what's coming, how many chapters, how many pictures, what are the vocabulary words, right? You don't think about all that, or you don't figure that out before you start to read. Some of us, including myself, would get incredibly bored and distracted while trying to read. So there are many, many benefits. I don't want to spoil it for you if you are looking to take that class. So we want you to inspect and read first, then we want you to ask questions, all of the questions, okay? And if you're not sure what questions you should be asking, we do have a brand new workshop called Comprehension Strategies. The title does, obviously we're talking about comprehension, but specifically we are talking about asking questions that you may not know you should be asking, right? Because we comprehend better by means of questions. So what kinds of questions should we be asking? Well, we've curated 6 questions that you should be using across the board. Doesn't matter what subject it is you are reading or learning from. And again, we want you to also be able to answer these questions, because if you can't answer them, then you shouldn't move on to the final step, which is storing this information. Maybe we're the type of student, and I am guilty of this, so I can speak freely and say that I would try to memorize things without really understanding them. And man, oh man, was my grade affected in nursing school because of this. Okay, so make sure you understand it, you can explain it, you know everything on there before you then try to internalize and memorize this information. So those are the 4 steps. Now, when we are looking to take notes again, there are specific strategies that we can use so that we can remember for longer. Starting with highlighting, think about, let's see, I'm just looking for my pen right here. Think about when you read and highlight at the same time. Do you think that what this the student has done in this book, do you feel like it's something that is beneficial? I think we'd all agree that's not, right? That's a lot of pink on the page. And so let's talk about the best practices first when we're talking about underlining and highlighting. Okay, so this is proven by research that when you read and highlight at the same time, it's actually seen to be a form of passive reading and learning, which really means you're not paying as much attention as you think you are. And that's not cool, right? When we are taking notes, we want to also think about this principle, because it does transfer over when you're handwriting or typing your notes out. And we say this because we want you to use strategy when you are highlighting. So we don't want you to read and highlight at the same time. You run the risk of highlighting things that are not important when you read and highlight at the same time. Similar when you're taking notes, writing everything down that the teacher is saying. How do you know what's important and what's not, right? So we want to emphasize this IRIS method again, because during your inspection, you get a good idea of the themes and the subjects that will be discussed when you are taking notes or when you're learning, right? So if you see certain vocabulary words that will be discussed, now we know, right? If we see certain pictures that will be in the chapter, well, now we know. Now we have a better idea, so that when we go to class, we can take that information, ask the questions we need to ask, and then write down the answers, and then write down things that make sense to us. But the problem is that most of us probably go to class, we don't go prepared, we don't check the syllabus, we don't inspect the chapter, we don't know what will be discussed, so we write things down that we don't understand, and then we go home and we try to make sense of what the chapter says with our notes, and then we kind of just wing it when it's time for the exam, right? And some of us are able to survive academically that way, but it's not the case for everybody. So we want to make sure, again, preparation. Please prepare beforehand. It will help you tremendously when taking notes. Some people have asked, actually, this is a very common question we get. What is better, handwriting your notes or typing your notes out? And we're not actually going to say what is better, because that pretty much depends on you. We will, however, share the research on the subject. Remember how we said in the beginning, the more you do something, the higher and the longer the chances of that staying in your memory? Well, when you write something down, you're not necessarily able to just write it down just like that, right? So you have to think about what was said and then repeat it a few times so that you can write it down. So it's not automatic. However, when you are typing your notes out, it is automatic. You don't even have to think about it. If you're typing right now, you probably are able to keep up with what I'm saying, no problem, right? So if your goal is to have this information stay in your memory for longer, think about this method of either typing or handwriting your notes out, okay? It's really important. It's a very, very basic thing, but it can be the one thing that maybe is stopping you from actually remembering this information. And when we are taking notes, we don't want them to look like this. So this is a lot to look at. This is like, ooh, it gives me anxiety every time I see this picture. And I've been teaching this workbook for like 3 years, and every time I see this, it makes my stomach hurt. Because this is just a lot. We don't necessarily think in this way, right? When we think about how we think in pictures, we think in movement, we think with color, right? Maybe we think in groups of words, but not full sentences, right? Everybody thinks differently. These are just some general observations that I've taken from other individuals, other conversations I've had on how people think. But the point is, most of us don't think like this. Like if you close your eyes, you probably can visualize what the page looks like. I doubt many of us will be able to actually pull what every single word is just by looking at it for 5 seconds, right? So let's find a better way to take our notes. Use a template, organize it a little better, a little neater, a little nicer, okay? Starting with an outline. Outlines are very simple. They're something that we learned how to use a long time ago when writing essays. We can also use this when we are writing our notes in class. Keep your notes nice and concise. Keep your sentences brief, or keep them in phrases. You've got everything spread out so that we know exactly what was said, when it was said, how it ties into everything, similar to an essay, right? Sketch notes are a wonderful way to take notes as well. We think in pictures, remember, so why not take notes in pictures, right? Just keep it in mind. We do have some pushback with this. Some participants have said, I'd never take notes this way, but Just think about it, right? Because the ultimate goal is to remember. And just by looking at this for maybe 5 or 10 seconds, if you close your eyes, you will successfully be able to remember certain things on the page, which is more than you can say about this. So keep it in mind, because pictures just stay in our memory for longer. They're easier to process. Another wonderful way to take notes, and this is my favorite, my personal favorite, is mind mapping, because as you are learning, most of us do not always automatically understand whatever it is that we're learning, right? It takes a while. And we like the mind, or I like the mind map method, because it actually mimics the way you think, right? So if you think about a thought process, we don't necessarily always understand immediately. So it's like a trail of breadcrumbs. You have one thing that leads to another thing, and then once you understand the next thing, then you understand the central topic, okay? And so this is like one of those, I like to call it like a 2-for-1 special type of thing, where you're reading and learning at the same time. Okay, I'm sorry, you're learning and you're taking notes at the same time. So this is a great way to do it. If you are looking to take mind mapped notes and you don't want to use hand and paper, I mean, you can if you want, but if you don't want to, we've been using this program for a very long time called xmind.net. It is free, but you do have to download it. That is the only thing. Okay, if you don't want to download anything, mindmeister.com is a good alternative. It is online, and another cool feature, you can look at other people's mind maps. So that's nice, because if you're missing something in your mind map, if you're not understanding the transition between point A and point B, this is a good alternative. This is a good one where you can look at other people's mind maps and see what the missing link was in your mind map. Cornell notes are a great way to take notes as well. This is fairly popular. We've got our keywords, our questions, our main notes in the middle, the summary and the bottom. Okay, so this is the pretty standard template. This one was actually created by our founder and CEO, Paul Novak. I had no idea. I had just recently learned that he created this, and while he claims to not be like a spreadsheet wizard, I find that very hard to be true, because I just think this is a genius way of taking notes, and I wish I had used something similar when I was in nursing school, because I think this would have helped me a lot. So this is how it works. You don't have to be a spreadsheet wizard like him, or I'm not. So, and if I can use it, I think anyone can. So you've got the title of the class up top, you've got your chapter number, your page number, your rating, and the note itself. So you've got hundreds or examples of notes that are most important, 50s are examples of notes that are important, and 20s are examples of notes that are important but they're least important. Okay, so then throughout the semester, throughout the year, this is how you are taking notes. So you've got the note, and then you've got the rating, the page number, the chapter number. So when you are looking to take final exams, for example, and the whole world is freaking out because there's no study guide, you're cool like a cucumber, because you don't have to worry about anything. It's all right here, and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about losing your notebook unless you lose your laptop. And even if you are backing everything up on Google Sheets, then you're golden. You don't have to worry about anything. Right, so this is a tremendous way to take notes. We have received a lot of positive feedback on this. Many students are using this, and it obviously makes us happy to see that these recommendations are working. Evernote is a great application to use. It has so many features, but the one that I have personally found to be of most benefit to me is the fact that if you have the application on your computer and you have the application on your cell phone, you are automatically synchronizing your notes, which means that for someone like myself that commutes downtown Chicago to my house, it takes about an hour and a half, depending on traffic. every day when I go to class. So I would never, ever, ever pull out my computer out on the train or on the bus in Chicago. It's like not a very good idea. But if I have my cell phone, I mean, instead of getting on TikTok, I can always just go back and review my notes while I'm commuting. So obviously Evernote has many, many features to it, and we don't have time to talk about all of them, but that is the one that I personally love the most. Now, let's get into an exercise that can help you when you concentrate. So remember we said sometimes you read things and they're not your favorite flavor. What do we do when we have to annotate? Well, we have the read and recall exercise. And read and recall is very good because it's like an accountability partner, except you're by yourself. So you read through a section, you take a note. You read through another section, you take a note. Now this note has to reflect what you just read. So you have to pay attention, right? So if you read through, let's say this section right here, we keep our note nice and brief. Literally, we're only bringing out the key points. And so instead of trying to digest an entire chapter, we are breaking it down into smaller portions. Now, we'll try this out together right now, using Bill Bryson's book, A Really Short History of Nearly Everything, okay? And so what we'll do is we're gonna read through a passage, we're gonna read through a section. I think we should move into chapter 1. And I will disable my webcam for this exercise. If you want to drop your summary of the paragraph, so you can just write your sentences in the chat if you'd like. You can write P1, paragraph 1 in your summary. You can write it on a piece of paper. You can text it to yourself. You can do whatever you'd like. But just for some interaction in the chat, if you'd like to do that, you're more than welcome to. I will turn on my timer. Now, keep in mind, when you do this on your own, you don't have to time yourself, okay? I just have to time us because I can't go over an hour, but you don't have to time yourself for this exercise, okay? So what we'll do is we'll read and we will take a note, all right, at the end of each paragraph, and just keep going. I'm gonna set the timer for a minute, but again, remember, when you do this on your own, you do not have to use a timer. All right, here we go with chapter 1, How to Build a Universe. Go ahead and start. And stop. We'll do it one more time. So let's try chapter 2. Here we go. Welcome to the solar system. Notice this first paragraph, I'm sorry, is a little larger, which means that our first summary sentence will be a little larger. Okay, let's just see here. I'm going to check the chat. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. I see your comments in the chat. Wonderful. Let's do this one more time, okay, with chapter 2. I'm sorry. Yeah, chapter 2, Welcome to the Solar System. And I'm restarting my timer. Here we go. 1 minute. 3, 2, 1, go. and stop. So that was just 2 chapters. Again, in the future, end of each paragraph, write a sentence, just pretty much summarizing a couple sentences, obviously depending on how large the chapter is. But again, just summarizing what you just read. It's a nice way to hold yourself accountable, make sure you actually are paying attention and not trying to get back to your phone, which is what most of us will try to do. There's no shame in admitting it, it just happens. Now, last thing we'll talk about is the science behind why we forget things, because we do unfortunately forget. And if I was to ask you, how quickly do you forget? You might say, I have a terrible memory. And here's the thing, we have just researched this. Well, we haven't just researched it, but we've been researching this for a while. And upon consideration of all of the literature on memory specifically, it turns out that if you don't necessarily have a condition or a disorder that impairs your memory, then you don't really have a bad memory. The problem is that most of us are so hyper-stimulated with cell phones and TikTok and Instagram and just everything, right? That it's very hard for our brain to always know when we're paying attention and when we're not, which means that sometimes when the brain thinks it's paying attention, it isn't. And so when you try to remember what you think you were paying attention to, and you can't, automatically one's default is, well, I must have a bad memory. And that's not the case, okay? So there is such a thing, however, as the forgetting curve, which essentially says that things will start to disappear almost immediately after you learn them. So if that is the case, then when should we review our notes? And we've actually uncovered a mathematical approach to memory. So there is such a thing as the forgetting curve again, but we can bypass that by using the Fibonacci sequence. Now, Fibonacci is nice because for one, you don't have to worry about memorizing this whole string of numbers. What you can, however, do is just notice these first 2 right here, so 1 and 1. Now, what is 1 plus 1? 2. Moving on, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 3 plus 5 is 8, and then we just keep on going, okay? Now, how do we use this? Well, we're going to use it as spacers for review periods. So let's say you learn something at noon. If you're using the Fibonacci review periods, you would review again 1 hour later, then 2 hours later, 3, 5, 8, 13 hours later. Okay, maybe you don't want to do it on an hourly basis. You want to do it on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. You want to do it on a minute by minute basis. So you learn something at 12, you review it 1 minute later, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13 minutes later. Okay, but it is important to space out your review periods. That is called spaced repetition. And if you marry that with retrieval practice, which is the practice of pulling information from your brain, including things you think you know really well, then you will be a memory rock star. Okay, so we want you to combine both because we see very, very good results. Now, a good example of retrieval practice are the famous, and I've never really liked them, so excuse my sarcastic tone, but the flashcards, right? That's something that is a wonderful example of retrieval practice. It's a great method to use. The only reason I didn't like them in my day was because we didn't have the electronic version like today, right? We didn't have Quizlet. We had those white cards with the rubber band, and then what would happen is my rubber band would snap and they would all float around in my book bag, and it was just a hot mess. But now things are so much easier with Quizlet. Right? You've got the app, you're ready to go, no worries, no problem. It's nice, it's bright, it's animated. There are many subjects already in there, so you might not even have to create your own deck. But the one thing that I appreciate the most of Quizlet is this section right here called game-based learning. Now, what this is scientists have seen that students who approach reading and learning with a joyful disposition, a happy disposition, you're actually excited to do this, to learn, you're seen to do better than those who are annoyed and miserable, right? When they are reviewing their notes or they're studying. And Quizlet has games on here already. Who doesn't like to play a game? right? Now, if you don't like any of the games on Quizlet, not a problem. You can create your own, right? Collaborate with a classmate, come up with a game. Find different ways to review your information. It doesn't necessarily always have to be just reading the same sentences over and over. Okay, so we want it to be enjoyable. Now with that, we are wrapping up today's presentation. If you would like to take the advanced version of today's class, you can find that on our website at irisreading.com. And I actually have a discount code for you in case you're interested. It is book lovers, all lowercase, for 30% off. If you would like today's presentation, the slides, any additional support, send me an email, cynthia@irisreading.com, and I can get that to you, no problem. I hope to see you all in a future session. Happy note taking. Any questions, please feel free to reach out. If you enjoyed the presentation, again, we'd appreciate if you liked and subscribed to our channel, and we will see you soon. Bye, everyone.